Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Chapter 17, The Man with Two Faces. It was Quirrell. "You!" gasped Harry. Quirrell smiled. His face wasn't twitching at all. "Me," he said calmly. "I wondered whether I'd be meeting you here, Potter. But I thought Snape... Severus." Quirrell laughed. It wasn't his usual quivering tremble either, but a cold and sharp laugh. "Yes, Severus does seem like the type, doesn't he? So useful to have him swooping around like an overgrown bat. Next to him, who would suspect poor stuttering Professor Quirrell?" Harry couldn't take it in. This couldn't be true. It couldn't. But Snape tried to kill me. No, I tried to kill you. Your friend Miss Granger accidentally knocked me over as she rushed to set fire to Snape that Quidditch match. She broke my eye contact with you. Another few seconds and I'd have you off that broom. I'd have managed it before then if Snape hadn't been muttering a counter curse trying to save you. Snape was trying to save me? Of course, said Quirrell coldly. Why do you think he wanted to referee your next match? He was trying to make sure I didn't do it again. Funny, really. He needn't have bothered. I couldn't do anything with Dumbledore watching. All the other teachers thought Snape was trying to stop Gryffindor from winning. He did make himself unpopular. And what a waste of time, when after all that, I'm going to kill you tonight. Quirrell snapped his fingers. Robes sprang out of thin air and wrapped themselves tightly around Harry. You're too nosy to live, Potter, scurrying around the school at Halloween like that. For all I knew, you'd seen me coming to look at what was guarding the stone. You let the troll in? Certainly. I have a special gift with trolls. You must have seen what I did to the one in the chamber back there. Unfortunately, while everyone else was running around looking for it, Snape, who already suspected me, went straight to the third floor to head me off. And not only did the troll fail to beat you to death, that three-headed dog didn't even manage to bite Snape's leg off properly. Now, wait quietly, Potter. I need to examine this interesting mirror. It was only then that Harry realized what was standing behind Quirrell. It was the mirror of Erised. This mirror is the key to finding the stone, Quirrell murmured, tapping his way around the fane. Trust Dumbledore to come up with something like this. But he's in London. I'll be far away by the time he gets back. All Harry could think of doing was keeping Quirrell talking and stop him from concentrating on the mirror. I saw you and Snape in the forest, he blurted out. Yes, said Quirrell idly, walking around the mirror to look at the back. He was on to me by the time, trying to figure out how far I'd got. He suspected me all along. Tried to frighten me, as though he could, when I had Lord Voldemort on my side. Quirrell came back from out of behind the mirror and stared hungrily into it. I see the stone. I'm presenting it to my master, but where is it? Harry struggled against the ropes binding him, but they didn't give. He had to keep Quirrell from giving his whole attention to the mirror. But Snape always seemed to hate me so much. Oh, he does, said Quirrell casually. Heavens, yes. He was at Hogwarts with your father, didn't you know? They loathed each other, but he never wanted you dead. But I heard you a few days ago, sobbing. I thought Snape was threatening you. For the first time, a spasm of fear flitted across Quirrell's face. Sometimes, he said, I find it hard to follow my master's instructions. He's a great wizard, and I am weak. You mean he was there in the classroom with you? Harry gasped. He's with me wherever I go, said Quirrell quietly. I met him when I traveled around the world. A foolish young man I was then, full of ridiculous ideas about good and evil. Lord Voldemort showed me how wrong I was. There's no good and evil. There's only power, and those too weak to seek it. Since then, I have served him faithfully, although I have let him down many times. He has had to be very hard on me. Quirrell shivered suddenly. He does not forgive mistakes easily. When I failed to steal the stone from Gringotts, he was most displeased. He punished me, decided he would have to keep a closer watch on me. Quirrell's voice tailed away. Harry was remembering his trip to Diagon Alley. How could he have been so stupid? He had seen Quirrell there that very day, shaken hands with him at the Leaky Cauldron. Quirrell cursed under his breath. I don't understand. The stone is inside the mirror. Should I break it? Harry's mind was racing. What I want more than anything else in the world at the moment, he thought, is to find the stone before Quirrell does. So if I look in the mirror, I should see myself finding it, which means I'll see where it is hidden. But how can I look without Quirrell realizing what I'm up to? He tried to edge to the left to get in front of the glass without Quirrell noticing, but the ropes around his ankles were too tight. He tripped and fell over. Quirrell ignored him. He was still talking to himself. What does the mirror do? How does it work? Help me, master. And to Harry's horror, a voice answered, and the voice seemed to come from Quirrell himself. Use the boy. Use the boy. Quirrell rounded on Harry. Yes, Potter, come here. He clapped his hands on Harry at once, and the robes binding Harry fell off. Harry got slowly to his feet. Come here, Quirrell repeated. Look in the mirror and tell me what you see. Harry walked towards him. I must lie, he thought desperately. I must look and lie about what I see. That's all. Quirrell moved close behind him. Harry breathed in the funny smell that seemed to come from Quirrell's turban. He closed his eyes, stepped in front of the mirror, and opened them. He saw his reflection, pale and scared looking at first. But a moment later, the reflection smiled at him. It put his hand into his pocket and pulled out a blood-red stone. It winked and put the stone back in its pocket. And as it did, so Harry felt something heavy drop into his real pocket. Somehow, incredibly, he'd got the stone. Well, Quirrell said impatiently, what do you see? Harry screwed up his courage. I see myself shaking hands with Dumbledore, he invented. I've won the House Cup for Gryffindor. Quirrell cursed again. Get out of the way, he said. As Harry moved aside, he felt the Sorcerer's Stone against his leg. Dare he make a break for it? But he hadn't walked 5 paces before a high voice spoke through Quirrell, and it wasn't Quirrell moving his lips. He lies! He lies! Potter, come back here, Quirrell shouted. Tell me the truth. What did you just see? The high voice spoke again. Let me speak to him, face to face. Master, you are not strong enough. I have strength enough for this. Harry felt as though the devil's snare was rooting him to the spot. He couldn't move a muscle, petrified. He watched as Quirrell reached up and began to unwrap his turban. What was going on? The turban fell away. Quirrell's head looked strangely small without it. Then he turned slowly on the spot. Harry would have screamed, but he couldn't make a sound. Where there should have been a back to Quirrell's head, there was a face, the most terrible face Harry had ever seen. It was chalk white with glaring red eyes and slits for nostrils, like a snake. Harry Potter, it whispered. Harry tried to take a step back, but his legs wouldn't move. See what I have become, the face said. Mere shadow and vapor. I have form only when I can share another's body. But there has always been those willing to let me into their hearts and minds. Unicorn blood has strengthened me these past weeks. You saw faithful Quirrell drinking it from me in the forest. And once I have the elixir of life, I will be able to create a body of my own. Now, why don't you give that stone to me from your pocket? So he knew. The feeling suddenly surged back into Harry's legs. He stumbled backwards. Don't be a fool, snarled the face. Better save your own life and join me, or meet the same end as your parents. They died begging me for mercy. Liar, Sherry shouted suddenly. Quirrell was walking backwards at him, so that Voldemort could still see him. The evil face was now smiling. How touching, it hissed. I always value bravery. Yes, boy, your parents were brave. I killed your father first, and he put up a courageous fight. But your mother needn't have died. She was trying to protect you. Now give me the stone, unless you want to have her die in vain. Never. Harry sprang towards the flame door, but Voldemort screamed, "Seize him!" And the next second, Harry felt Quirrell's hands closed on his wrist. At once, a needle-sharp pain seared across Harry's scar. His head felt as though it was about to split in two. He yelled, struggling with all his might, and to his surprise, Quirrell let go of him. The pain in his head lessened. He looked around wildly to see where Quill had gone, and saw him hunched in pain, looking at his fingers. They were blistering before his eyes. "Seize him! Seize him!" shrieked Voldemort again, and Quirrell lunged, knocking Harry clean off his feet, landing on top of him, both hands around Harry's neck. Harry's scar was almost blinding him with pain, yet he could see Quirrell howling in agony. "Master, I cannot hold him! My hands! My hands!" And Quirrell, through pinning Harry to the ground with his knees, let go of his neck and stared, bewildered, at his own palms. Harry could see they looked burnt, raw, red, and shiny. "Then kill him, fool! It had to be done!" screeched Voldemort. Quirrell raised his hand to perform the deadly curse, but Harry, by instinct, reached up and grabbed Quirrell's face. Ah! Quirrell rolled off of him, his face blistering too. Then Harry knew Quirrell couldn't touch his bare skin, not without suffering terrible pain. His only chance was to keep a hold of Quirrell, keep him in enough pain to stop him doing a curse. Harry jumped to his feet, caught Quirrell by the arm, and hung on as tight as he could. Quirrell screamed and tried to throw Harry off. The pain in Harry's head was only building. He couldn't see. He could only hear Quirrell's terrible screech and Voldemort's yells of "Kill him! Kill him!" and other voices, maybe in Harry's own head, crying, "Harry! Harry!" He felt Quirrell's arm wrenched from his grasp. He knew all was lost, and fell to black. Down, down, down. Something gold was glinting just above him. The snitch! He tried to catch it, but his arms were too heavy. He blinked. It wasn't the snitch at all. It was a pair of glasses. How strange. He blinked again. The smiling face of Albus Dumbledore swam into view above him. "Good afternoon, Harry," said Dumbledore. Harry stared at him. Then he remembered. "Sir, the stone! It was Quirrell! He's got the stone! Sir, quick!" "Calm yourself, dear boy. You are a little behind the times," said Dumbledore. "Quirrell does not have the stone." "Then who does, sir? Harry, please, relax, or Madame Pomfrey will have me thrown out." Harry swallowed and looked at him. He realized he must be in the hospital wing. He was lying in a bed with light linen sheets next to him, and next to him was a table piled with what looked like half the sweet shop. "Tokens from your friends and admirers," said Dumbledore, beaming. "What happened down in the dungeons is between you and Professor Quirrell is a complete secret, so naturally the whole school knows. I believe your friends Fred and George Weasley are responsible for trying to send you a Laverty set. No doubt they thought it would amuse you. Madame Pomfrey, however, felt as though it would not be very hygienic, and confiscated it." "How long have I been in here?" 3 days. Mr. Ronald Weasley and Miss Granger were most relieved to know you have come around. They have been extremely worried. But sir, the stone." "I see you are not to be distracted. Very well, the stone, Professor Quirrell did not manage to take it from you. I arrived in time to prevent that, although you were doing very well on your own, I must say." "You got there? You got Hermione's owl?" "We must have crossed in midair. No sooner than I had reached London than it became clear to me that the place I was to be was the place I had just left. I arrived just in time to put Quirrell off of you. It was you. I feared I might be too late. You nearly were. I couldn't have kept him off the stone for much longer. Not the stone, boy. You. The effort involved nearly killed you. For one terrible moment there, I was afraid it has. For the moment the stone, it has been destroyed." "Destroyed?" Harry said blankly. "But your friend, Nicholas Flamel." "Oh, you know Nicholas Flamel," said Dumbledore, sounding quite delighted.
You did do the thing properly, didn't you? Well, Nicholas and I had a little chat and agreed it's for the best. But that means he and his wife will die, won't they? They have enough elixir stored to set their affair in orders, and yes, they will die.
Dumbledore smiled at the look of amazement on Harry's face.
To one as young as you, I am sure it seems incredible. But Nicholas and Persan, it really is like going to bed after a very, very long day. After all, to the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. You know, the stone was really not a stone, as a wonderful thing, as much money in life as you could want. The two other most human things would choose above all. The trouble is, humans do have a knack for choosing precisely those things which are worst for them.
Harry lay there, lost for words. Dumbledore hummed a little and smiled at the ceiling. Sir, said Harry, I've been thinking. Sir, even if the stone's gone, you know who.
Call him Voldemort, Harry. Always use the proper name for things. Fear of a name increases the fear of the thing itself.
Yes, sir. Well, Voldemort, on the other hand, was coming back, isn't he? He has gone, hasn't he?
No, Harry, he has not. He is still out there, somewhere, perhaps looking for another body to share. Not being truly alive, he cannot be killed. He left Quirrell to die. It just shows as little mercy as his followers and enemies. Nevertheless, Harry, while you may have only delayed his return to power, it will merely only take someone else who is prepared to fight what seems a losing battle next time. And if it is delayed again and again, why, he may never return to power.
Harry nodded, but stopped quickly, because it had made his head hurt. Then he said, Sir, are there some other things I'd like to know, if you can tell me? Things I want to know the truth about?
The truth, Dumbledore sighed. It's a very beautiful and terrible thing, and should therefore be treated with very great caution. However, I shall answer your questions unless I have a very good reason not to, in which case I'll beg you to forgive me. I shall not lie.
Well, Voldemort said that he only killed my mother because she tried to stop him from killing me. But why would he want to kill me in the first place? Dumbledore sighed, a very deeply breath this time.
Alas, the first thing you asked me, I cannot tell you. Not today, not now. You will know one day. Put it far from your mind now, Harry, when you are older. I know you hate to hear this. When you are ready, you will know.
And Harry knew it would be no good to argue. But why couldn't Quirrell touch me?
Your mother died to save you. If there is one thing Voldemort cannot understand, it is love. He did not realize that love is as powerful as your mother's, does not leave its own mark, not a scar, no visible sign. To have been loved so deeply, even the person who loved us is gone, will give you the protection forever. It is in your very skin. Quirrell, full of hatred, greed, and ambition, sharing his soul with Voldemort, could not touch you for his reason. It was agony to touch a person marked by such good.
Dumbledore now became very interested in a bird at the window, still, which gave Harry time to dry his eyes on his sheet. When he had found his voice again, Harry said, And the invisibility cloak, do you know who sent it to me?
Ah, your father happened to leave it in my possession, and I thought you might like it.
Dumbledore's eyes twinkled.
Useful for your things. Your father used it mainly for sneaking off into the kitchens to sneer food, and he was here. And there's something else.
Fire away. Quirrell and Snape.
Professor Snape, Harry.
Yes, him. Quirrell said he hates me because he hated my father. Is that true?
Well, they did rather detest each other. Not unlike yourself and Mr. Malfoy. And then your father did something Snape could never forgive.
What?
He saved his life.
What?
Yes, Dumbledore said dreamily. Funny the ways people's minds work, isn't it? Professor Snape could not bear being in your father's debt. I do believe it worked so hard to protect you this year, because he felt as though it would make up for your father's quits. Then he could go back to hating your father's memory in peace.
Harry tried to understand this, but it made his head pound, so he stopped. And sir, there's one more thing.
Just the one?
How did I get the stone out of the mirror?
Ah, now, I'm glad you asked me about that. It was one of the more brilliant ideas I've ever had. And between you and me, that's saying something. You see, only one who wanted to find the stone, find it, but not use it, would be able to get it. Otherwise, they just see themselves making gold or drinking elixir of life. My brain surprises even me sometimes. Now, enough questions. I suggest you make a start on the sweets. Barty bought every flavored beans. I was unfortunate enough to have one in my youth. That was a vomit-flavored one. And since now, I'm afraid I'd rather lost my liking for them. But I think I'll be safe with a nice toffee, don't you?
He smiled and popped the golden brown bean into his mouth. Then he choked and said,
Alas, earwax.
Madame Pomfrey, the matron, was a nice woman, but very strict. Just 5 minutes, Harry pleaded. Absolutely not.
You let Professor Dumbledore in? Well, of course, he was the headmaster. Quite different. You need to rest. I am resting. Look, lying down and everything. Oh, go on, Madame Pomfrey.
Very well, she said, but 5 minutes only. And she let Ron and Hermione in.
Harry!
Hermione looked ready to fling her arms around him again, but Harry was glad. She held herself in his head, was very sore.
Oh, Harry, we were sure you were going to... Dumbledore was so worried. The whole school's been talking about it. And Ron, what really happened?
It was one of those rare occasions when the true story was even more strange and exciting than the wild rumors. Harry told them everything. Quirrell, the mirror, the stone, and Voldemort. Ron and Hermione were a very good audience. They gasped in all the right places. And when Harry told them that was under Quirrell's turban, Hermione screamed out loud.
So the stone's gone, said Ron finally. Flamel's just going to die?
That's what I said, but Dumbledore thinks that... What was it? To the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. I've always said he was off his rocker, said Ron, looking quite impressed at how mad his hero was. So what happened to you two? Said Harry. Well, I got back all right, said Hermione. I brought Ron around. It took a while. We were dashing up the Hourly to contact Dumbledore when we met him in the entrance hall. He already knew. He just stopped and said, Harry's gone after him, hasn't he? And hurled it off to the 3rd floor. Did you think he meant you to do it? Said Ron, sending you your father's cloak and everything. Well, Hermione exploded. If he did, I mean to say, that's terrible. You could have been killed. No, it isn't, said Harry thoughtfully. He's a funny man, Dumbledore. I think he sort of wanted to give me a chance. I think he knows more or less everything that goes on here, you know? I reckon he had a pretty good idea we were going to try instead of stopping us. He thought it would be good enough to help. I don't think it was an accident he let me find out how the mirror worked. It's almost like he thought I had the right to face Voldemort if I could. Yeah, Dumbledore's barking all right, said Ron proudly. Listen, if you've got to be up for the end of the year feast tomorrow, the points are all in. Slytherin won, of course. You missed the last Quidditch match. We were steamrolled by Ravenclaw without you. But the food will be good. At that moment, Madame Pomfrey bustled over. You've had nearly 15 minutes. Now out, she said firmly. After another good night's sleep, Harry felt nearly back to normal. I want to go to the feast, he told Madame Pomfrey as she straightened his mini sweet boxes. I can, can't I? Professor Dumbledore says that you are allowed to go, she said stiffly, as though, in her opinion, Dumbledore didn't realize how risky feats could be. And you have another good visitor. Oh, good, said Harry. Who is it? Hagrid slid through the door as he spoke. As usual, when indoors, Hagrid looked too big to be allowed. He sat down next to Harry and took one look at him and burst into tears. It's all my ruddy fault, He sobbed, his face in his hands. "I told the evil git how to get past Fluffy. I told him. It was the only thing I didn't know, and I told him. You could have died, all for a dragon egg. I could never drink again. I should be checked into a... I should be tracked into a muggle." "Hagrid," said Harry, shocked to see Hagrid shaking his head with grief and remorse, great tears leaking down his beard. "Hagrid, I could have found out somehow. This is Voldemort we're talking about. He'd have found out even if you hadn't told him."
"You could have died,"
sobbed Hagrid.
"and don't say the name."
"Voldemort," Harry bellowed, and Hagrid was so shocked he stopped crying. "I've met him, and I'm calling him by his name. Please, cheer up, Hagrid. We saved the stone. It's gone. He can't use it. Have a chocolate frog. I've got loads." Hagrid wiped his nose on the back of his hands and said,
"That reminds me. I've got you a present."
"It's not a sandwich, is it?" said Harry anxiously, and Hagrid gave a weak chuckle.
"Nah, Dumbledore gave it to me the day of yesterday to fix it. Of course, he should have sacked me instead. Anyway, got you this."
It seemed to be a handsome, leather-covered book. Harry opened it curiously, and it was full of wizard photographs. Smiling and waving at him from every page were his mother and father.
"Sent owls off to your parents. Old school friends, asking for photos. Knew you didn't have any. Did you like it?"
Harry couldn't speak, but Hagrid understood. Harry made his way down to the end-of-year feast alone that night. He had been held up by Madame Pomfrey's fussing about, insisting on giving him one last checkup, so the great hall was already full. It was decked out in the Slytherin colors of green and silver to celebrate Slytherin's winning of the House Cup for the 7th year in a row. A huge banner showing the Slytherin serpent covered the walls behind the high table. When Harry walked in, there was a sudden hush, and then everyone started talking loudly at once. He slipped into a seat in between Ron and Hermione at the Gryffindor table, and tried to ignore the fact that people were standing up to look at him. Fortunately, Dumbledore arrived moments later. The babble died down.
"Another year gone," Dumbledore said cheerfully, "and I must trouble you with an old man's wheezing waffle before we sink our teeth into this delicious feast. What a year has been! Hopefully your heads are a little bit fuller than they were when you have arrived. You have the whole summer ahead to get them nice and empty before next year starts. Now, as I understand it, the House Cup needs awarding and the points stand. Thus, in 4th place, Gryffindor with 312 points. In 3rd place, Hufflepuff with 352. Ravenclaw have 426. Slytherin, 472.
A storm of cheering and stamping broke out from the Slytherin table. Harry could see Draco Malfoy banging his goblet on the table. It was a sickening sight.
Yes, you've done well, Slytherin," said Dumbledore. "However, recent events must be taken into account."
The room went very still. The Slytherin smiles faded a little.
"Ahem," said Dumbledore. "I have a few last-minute points to dish out. Let me see, yes. First to Mr. Ronald Weasley."
Ron went purple in the face. He looked like a radish with a bad sunburn.
"For the best played game of chess Hogwarts has seen in many years, I award Gryffindor House 50 points.
Gryffindor cheers nearly raised the bewitched ceiling. The stars overhead seemed to quiver. Percy couldn't be heard telling the other prefects, "My brother, you know, my youngest brother," got past McGonagall's giant chess set. At last there was silence again.
"Second to Miss Hermione Granger. For the use of cool logic in the face of fire, I award Gryffindor House 50 points."
Hermione buried her face in her arms. Harry strongly suggested that she had burst into tears. Gryffindors up and down the table were beside themselves. They were 100 points up.
"Third to Mr. Harry Potter,"
said Dumbledore. The room went deadly quiet.
"For pure nerve and outstanding courage, I award Gryffindor House 60 points."
The din was deafening. Those who could add up while yelling themselves hoarse knew that Gryffindor had now had 472 points, exactly the same as Slytherin. They had drawn for House Cup. If only Dumbledore had given Harry just one more point. Dumbledore raised his hand. The room gradually fell silent.
There are all kinds of courage, said Dumbledore, smiling. It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends. I, therefore, award 10 points to Mr. Neville Longbottom.
Someone standing outside the great hall might have thought some sort of explosion had taken place. So loud was the noise that erupted from the Gryffindor table. Harry, Ron, and Hermione stood up and yelled to cheer as Neville, white with shock, disappeared under a pile of people hugging him. He had never won so much of a point for Gryffindor before. Harry, still cheering, nudged Ron in the ribs and pointed at Malfoy, who couldn't have looked more stunned and horrified at what he just witnessed. Which means, Dumbledore called over the storm of applause, for even Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff were celebrating the downfall of Slytherin.
We need a little change in decoration.
He clapped his hands. In an instant, the green hangings became scarlet, and the silver became gold. The huge Slytherin serpent vanished, and a towering Gryffindor lion took its place. Snape was shaking Professor McGonagall's hand with a horrible, forced smile. He caught Harry's eye, and Harry knew at once that Snape's feeling towards him has not changed one jot. This did not worry Harry. It seemed as though his life would be back to normal next year, or as normal as it ever was at Hogwarts. It was the best evening of Harry's life, better than winning Quidditch, or Christmas, or knocking out mountain trolls. He would never, ever forget tonight. Harry had almost forgotten the exam results were still to come, but come they did. To their great surprise, both he and Ron passed with good marks. Hermione, of course, came out as the top of the year. Even Neville scraped through. His good herbology mark came up for his abyssal potions one. They had hoped that Goyle was almost as stupid as he was mean, might be thrown out, but he had passed too. It was a shame. But Ron said, you couldn't have everything in life. And suddenly their wardrobes were empty, their trunks were packed, Neville's toad was found lurking in a corner of the toilets, notes were handed out to all students, warning them not to use magic over the holidays. I always hope they'll forget to give us these, said Fred Weasley, sadly. Hagrid was there to take the fleet of boats that sailed across the lake. They were boarding the Hogwarts Express, talking and laughing at the courtside, became greener and tidier, eating Bertie Bott's every flavored beans as they sped off past Muggle towns, pulling off their wizard robes and putting jackets on and coats, pulling into platform 9 3/4 at King's Cross Station. It took quite a while for them to get off the platform. A wizened old guard was up by the ticket barrier, letting them go through the gate in 2s and 3s so that they didn't attract any attention by bursting all out of a solid wall at once and alarming the Muggles. You must come and stay this summer, said Ron. Both of you. I'll send you an owl. Thanks, said Harry. I'll need something to look forward to. People jostled them as they moved forward towards the gate, back to the Muggle world. Some of them called, Bye, Harry. See you, Potter. Still famous, said Ron, grinning at him. Not where I'm going, I promise you, said Harry. He, Ron, and Hermione passed through the gateway together. There he is, Mom. There he is, look. It was Ginny Weasley, Ron's younger sister, but she wasn't pointing at Ron. Harry Potter, she squealed. Look, Mom, I can see. Be quiet, Ginny. It's rude to point. Miss Weasley smiled down at them. Busy year, she said. Very, said Harry. Thanks for the fudge and the jumper, Miss Weasley. Oh, it was nothing, dear. Ready, are you? It was Uncle Vernon, still purple-faced, still mustached, still looking furious at the nerve of Harry, carrying an owl and a cage in a station full of ordinary people. Behind him stood Aunt Petunia and Dudley, looking terrified at the very sight of Harry. You must be Harry's family, said Mrs. Weasley. In a manner of speaking, said Uncle Vernon. Hurry up, boy, we haven't gotten all day. He walked away. Harry hung back for a last word with Ron and Hermione. See you over the summer, then. Hope you have a good holiday, said Hermione, looking very uncertainly after Uncle Vernon, shocked that anyone could be so unpleasant. Oh, I will, said Harry, and they were surprised at the grin that was spreading over his face. They, don't know we're not allowed to use magic at home. I'm going to have a very fun summer with Dudley this year.